Hey everyone, so in this series of videos I'm talking about 14 layers of strategy as applied to river flows in U, and in general on this channel hope to empower all of you to advance at the piano with maximum efficiency, independence, and quality through strategy. And as I've said numerous times in this series, typically I'll talk about dozens, even hundreds of layers of strategy and mindset in my teaching. These are just 14 arbitrary layers. They could have been different layers. They could have been in a different order. There are many more concepts than this. This is just one possible way you can start to gradually incorporate layers of strategies, methods, tactics, and anything you want to call them into your playing. The overall thinking being that it makes way more sense to, if you find, in this case, 14 different really good things that'll help your playing, to incorporate all of them in your playing instead of just one of them. Maybe another one. Let's do this one here. Let's do this one over there. Why would you not use all of them together as long as there's a logical, coherent way to keep track of everything? And I have that here. So, so we're going to continue going over these layers here. We have 10 of them so far. So they're getting pretty numerous. And today we're going to talk about memorizing from the start. This is very simple. It doesn't really require nearly as much explanation as, sometimes I think that, and then I still end up making a really long video. So I'm not going to promise anything there. Which of these colors have I not used? Let's see if we can even see this. Probably not. Yeah. Okay. Well, you can still kind of see it. So you got... No, that's not good. But anyway, we got memorized from the start, and then I'm going to kind of briefly go over these other ideas, just for anybody that hasn't seen the other videos. So let's just use this kind of shade of blue. So memorize from the start, and as briefly as possible, I will just talk through and cover these other areas, right? So we're doing, from the beginning, separate hands to quality. We're being careful not to make mistakes. We're starting as slow as we need to, starting with super small sections. We always have an overlapping note. It means one page plus the following note, one section plus the following note. I call them sets in my logical methodology. One measure plus the next note is a one measure set. Half a measure plus the next note is a half measure set. Two measures plus the next note is a two measure set, and so on. All the fingering's written beforehand. We do spaced repetition. We move on from things after we practice, allow time to pass, then we come back and redo them, move on, come back, we redo them. Every time we redo that, it's strengthening long-term learning instead of just doing the same thing over and over again, because that's not good for long-term learning. Keeping track of things using my logical notation, adding in reverse instead of starting from the beginning all over again, like we're practicing just the ending part, then from the middle, then from a little bit before the middle, instead of going from the beginning so that the ending is not neglected. We should be increasing to the next size or order of complexity each time through. So if you have two half measure sets, increase to a 1 the next time. 2 ones, increase to a 2 the next time, and so on. Transition from separate into both hands in at least a 2-to-1 ratio. If you have 2 measure separate hand sets, you do 1 measure both hand sets the next time. If you have 4 measure separate hand sets, do 2 measure both hand sets the next time, because both hands are so much more difficult. Adding in reverse for both hands, which I mentioned in the last video, is actually the idea of adding in reverse separate and then both for each step. So for instance, if you have a 1 measure both hand set that you want to solve, you can do the last half measure set, right hand and then left hand and then both, and then the entire 1 measure set, right hand and then left hand and then both. That is our default way of solving both hand sets, adding something in reverse, separate and then both for each step. And today all we're adding to that is just this idea of memorizing from the start. My logical methodology is a way of linking all things. It is really just logical thinking, honestly, when you get right down to it, I believe. So it logically links anything, including memory. And what does that mean? Of course you can memorize something if you play it a whole bunch of times over and over again, but it may be that things just kind of result more in muscle memory. Even with all of these other concepts, if you overly rely on just looking at the score so much beforehand, looking at the music beforehand, you may not be as good at starting from different areas. You may not be as aware of a lot of different sections and so on. But if you memorize from the beginning, it really forces awareness. And combined with all these other layers, you will find that you'll be reading music much faster. You'll be able to start from, just about anywhere in the music. Over time, you will just become much more versatile and much more solid as a performer if you are memorizing, playing from memory many different sections. So I'm just going to, I think it'll be easy to demonstrate that while going through some examples here. So let me actually go ahead and, let's update some of these markers like a little bit, I guess. Or maybe we'll just get right into the practice. Again, I'll pretend that I'm a student here. And so when I'm memorizing from the beginning, I see 2 half measure both hand sets next to each other. So that means I should try to increase to a 1 this time by the rule of expansion. Because if you have 2 sets of the same size next to each other, we should try to increase the next order of magnitude, no matter what, right? And each thing that I do here is going to be from memory, right? So I might be doing just the right hand alone here, and then the left hand alone, and then both. This is the adding in reverse for both hands I talked about last week. Right hand alone, then left alone, and then both. And each of these things is going to be from memory. So most people, because the music's right in front of me over here, they would look at this, do that a bunch of times, and then, look away. I don't do this. Instead, basically, I just look at it, I study it carefully, and then I'll try to play from memory. Right? It doesn't have to be with eyes closed, although that I think is a helpful thing to do as well. But at least you want to do it from memory. And now you might say, well, what if I don't remember it? That's okay. If I look at it, and then I'm like I forgot it somehow, I would know the exact spot that I didn't pay enough attention to. So it really is very helpful assessment each and every time, right? So that's the mindset that you want to have. Study it carefully, play from memory immediately. Just study it and then play from memory whatever it is you're trying to do. If you succeed, great. If you're not successful, you know the exact thing you didn't pay enough attention to, and that will make you more observant in the future. And you'll just become more observant overall over time, so that when you study it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I need to pay more attention to that ending part, because I probably won't remember it the moment I look away from it, right? You'll start to know the types of things to pay more attention to. So I play that from memory. And then maybe now I am playing this from memory, right? And then maybe now I'm playing both ends from memory. You can do eyes closed if you want. For some students, I actually want them to look at their hands more, because we want them to pay more attention to how it's visually looking. Then I might play this next part, and you'll just have to trust I'm doing this from memory, right? So I'm doing the whole thing. I'm just doing it with my eyes closed to show I'm playing from memory. Left hand alone here would be this. Right? So I'm playing then from memory. And then I can play both hands from memory. So that was the case there, and then I can increase the size here of these half measure sets into a 1. So let me go ahead and erase these, and I will mark a 1 here. So yeah, I think for sake of time, I'm not going to do a very extended practice example. Maybe in the last few videos, I won't have to review so in detail all those other layers as well too. I think this is a very simple thing to apply. So basically every single step that you do, whether it's solving quarter measure sets from the beginning, solving separate hand sets, quarter measure separate hand sets, half measure separate hand sets, each individual step of adding in reverse, when you do the rule of expansion, the rule of transition, all these different ideas, just do everything from memory. Before you know it, you will be memorizing larger and larger sections. It'll feel like you're not doing anything in a good way. When you do quarter measure sets, you might be like, oh, I'm really bad at memorizing. Well, but can you memorize 3 notes? Can you do this from memory? If so, then do so, right? So, so I would suggest when you mark these sets markers from the start, just do it from memory. Because if you don't do this and you've gotten to 2 measure, 4 measure, 8 measure sets, you're going to kind of have to start over in some way, except now from memory. So why do that? Just try to do from memory from the start. I think you'll find it's quite easy to do. Even if it isn't easy to do small sets, do even smaller sets from memory. Just do 2 notes from memory. Anybody can remember like 2 notes in their short-term memory. And that will, with spaced repetition, become more and more solid over time using the method, right? So very briefly, how did we account for all these different things? We started with separate hands at the beginning of this whole process. Right, if you go back to the first video, and we would do that with new sections as well too. Being very observant, careful about quality, starting as slow as needed, although I'm not demonstrating that now, but do as slow as necessary to preserve quality. We're doing super small sections, as you've seen in many of the other videos, and we'll continue to do that with new parts. Always having an overlapping note because of sets in the methodology, all the fingering is written. We do spaced repetition instead of massed. We move on and come back to things many times instead of doing it over and over again. Keeping track using the logical methodology and the notation. We're adding in reverse by not starting from the beginning mindlessly. We're practicing the endings and making sure those transitions are smooth. We are expanding, right? We're going from like half measure sets into ones into twos each time the next pass through. Didn't have a specific example of that this time, but if you go back to the 8th layer, you'll see that we did that, and I could do more examples of that. But we would do that if this practice video included, an area where we're coming back to, let's say, like 2 halves going into 1, 2 ones into a 2. That would have been my thought process. So, and then the rule of transition, I believe we did do that. We had 1 measure separate hand sets, and we transitioned into half measure both hand set this time. We used the adding in reverse. We used the adding in reverse method for both hands this time. We did separate then both for each step, right? We did like last half measure set, right hand alone, left hand alone, and then both, and the whole 1 measure set, left hand alone, right hand alone, and then both. And we memorized everything from the beginning, which is what we covered today. Hope that's helpful. Please like, subscribe, let people know about the channel. If you thought so, let me know your thoughts. We've only got 3 more layers, so looking forward to covering that with you guys in the next 3 weeks, of course. Okay, see you guys soon.